Proseguiamo la nostra video.
Let's go on with our video class talking about profiterole. Profiterole has ancient origins, even though, as we learn to discover, giving an authenticity or a temporal origin to so popular preparations is so difficult. But just to understand what the main sources are, according to us, we're around the 16th century. They say it was born in France or in Tuscany, because in the 16th century, so from the beginning to the half of the century, our Caterina de' Medici married the King of France, brought a series of artisans, especially in gastronomy, to the court, and so they say that profiteroles actually was born as a base, so beignet paste, choux paste, by Tuscan artisans that, thanks to their skills, realized the base, created the base that became the profiteroles. So tendentially we don't know if it was invented in Tuscany or directly in France, but more or less we're around that period of time. We are talking about beignets that are made using a major fat matter to make them a little bit more sphere-like in their perimeter. So we try to use either milk and water or milk, a pinch of salt and a pinch of sugar, and we let the butter melt. We bring it to a strong boil, take out of the oven, 0 medium flour all together. We're going to mix to activate the jellifying of the starch. When we obtain a sort of paste, we go back over heat. We're going to stir for 30-40 seconds, and then we're going to pour the mixture that has probably started attaching to the casserole and formed a transparent layer on the surface. We're going to transfer it to a planetary machine that's working with a leaf. So we're going to mix, we're going to pour the eggs a little at a time until they absorb. Then we are transferring to a pastry bag, 8 to 10 nozzle, and we're going to dress our beignets directly on a baking tray. We're going to bake at a temperature of around 180 to 100 degrees. It depends on the size of our choux. And they're going to bake for 15-18 minutes. We're going to open the oven, we're going to wait that the base dries, and then we can let them cool and we can start stuffing them. The stuffing or filling. Profiteroles was born with chantilly cream, so a semi-whipped cream with sugar and vanilla. But today it's not strange to see them filled either with pastry cream or with chantilly cream, which is a proportion of pastry cream and semi-whipped cream, or with chantilly. As we said in many occasions, the strong evolution brought to totally change the glazing and the stuffing part, so we can find beignets with flavors and glazings that are completely innovative. We're going to stuff our beignets with our base, and then we're going to glaze them with a chocolate glazing. We made a ganache base with cream and invert sugar. We used glucose syrup. We heated it up at 180 degrees, and then we poured into the chocolate, minced chocolate, into 2-3 steps. When we stir the chocolate, we will incorporate a lot of air. The bubbles of air to the glazing will break, forming some small holes that disturb the aesthetic part of our profiteroles. So I always advise, when you finished stirring, so always hand blend your frosting, because it will allow a better emulsion of the components we were talking about. We're going to emulsify nicely, and then we're going to let it cool. Clearly, we advise you either vacuum it to speed up this process, or just wait a little bit for the air to come out of the surface. The ideal temperature to dress and glaze the shoes of the chocolate is around 34-35 degrees on a room temperature base. If you instead want to give a slight deep freeze to your beignets to have a glazing that dresses it better, I advise you to use a temperature of 37-38 degrees on a base that's coldish, so like 4 degrees. So we're going to make a little hole on the base, the smooth base of our shoe. This will allow us to favor the insertion of our pastry bag. Clearly, when we have to fill some shoes to make a lot of profiteroles, there are some machineries, lever machineries or electronic machineries, that allow us to insert the beignets in one corner, and with a lever we're going to insert inside the right quantity of filling. So we've had a thorough explanation, and now we're going to see how to stuff them. This is a very important part. So we have a tray with a rack on top to favor the dripping of the excess chocolate. This is important because if we directly go onto a dish, we might have a lot of residue of glazing that might finish on the dish, and so it's not very, we might have an exaggerated quantity of chocolate at the bottom and it wouldn't be very pleasant. So we were saying that we're going to take our beignets, our pastry bag. We've used a chantilly cream with a proportion of 60% of pastry cream and 40% of semi-whipped cream without sugar, because all of the sugars we need, we already have them in our pastry cream. I always advise you to put the semi-whipped cream a little at a time in the pastry cream, so always learn to lighten it, lighten the harder part you have. After the first stages, when we have broken the resistant part of the cream, we can of course fold from bottom to top with the remaining part. I remind you that especially in the summer, whipping the cream is very difficult because of the strong heat. So cool the cream nicely, cool the bowl a lot. We're going to remove the excess of our pastry bag, and then we're going to stuff our beignets. I'm going to insert inside, and the hand must be put enveloping the shoe. You must almost feel the torsion to the push of the filling. So we must be careful not to overdo this and break our shoe. Clearly imagine that when a client tastes this product, we have to put the right quantity of filling, because it would not be very pleasant to taste a stuffed product. We're talking about beignets, but any stuffed product that doesn't have a lot of stuffing inside. Remember that in this phase, as we're working, already start thinking if you want to glaze your beignets at room temperature, or if you want to cool them down a little bit. Remember that in this phase I advise you to whip your cream to make the classical swirls in the external part. Clearly with this base we can't only make profiteroles. There are a lot of preparations that are very well known, like croquembouche. Croquembouche is different from profiteroles because croquembouche has as a glazing caramel, So it's always pyramid shape, but the beignets are attached to each other with caramel. The base we're seeing can also be used apart from making beignets of typical Italian pastry or eclairs. For French pastry, you can use our choux. So once we stuffed our product, we're going to start monitoring the temperature of our glazing or frosting, and we can start frosting our beignets. Before doing so, always check the base, and we're going to remove the excess by scraping them. This is important because it will avoid to stain your frosting. Always make a test, never continuously work on the glazing if it's not ready. So we're going to submerge our choux inside. We're going to use this type of little chocolate fork. I'm going to do this movement to see if the temperature we chose is the right one. We're going to lift it, and then we're going to start placing it in our tray to remove the excess. So we're going to take our tray where we put oven paper or plastic film, and this will allow us to catch the excess of our product. With a little knife, we're going to help the fork. I don't need to make any stripes on the surface of the choux. So, remove the excess that's coming out, push inside, then lifting always from the base, always wait a few seconds, and then you can place them with the knife underneath or any other useful tool like this. I prefer to use some racks that are quite large because chocolate can better flow on the base, so underneath. Now we're going to slowly remove them. Clearly, when you're making very important quantities, we can completely insert the ready choux, and we're going to put them directly on a gastronome with the rack already inserted. So we're going to submerge the rack into the chocolate, and then we're going to lift them to glaze a lot of beignets at a time. Clearly, we can also work by dripping the glazing on top of the choux. So we can create our pyramid, blast chill it, and then we're going to directly coat it with our chocolate at 37 degrees to make it just faster. If the base temperature of your stuffed choux and the one of the glaze are optimal, it means that in the external part we will notice this, so a complete coating. If for any reason you notice that maybe the chocolate does not coat completely and stops to the superficial part, it means that it's either too cold or the choux is too cold. At the same time, if when we're glazing you see that the chocolate is penetrating the choux, it means that it's way too warm. or the shoes are way too warm. Now we're going to put them on a dish. We prefer to start with odd numbers. So we're going to make 5, 3, 2, 1. And we're going to blast chill and then finish the decoration with some cream. And then we're going to go directly in exposition. So let's take our tools. Let's start from the base. Always working with the base of the shoe. Clearly, if there's some small imperfection, we have some more frosting that we're going to use. Always try to catch the perimeter and be on the same distance between the beignets and the sides of your dish. Always remember that building a profiterole is important. Let's make 7, 5, 3, 2, 3, 1. A little bit bigger. So building your profiteroles is like having some little bricks that must be as equal as possible and where you can join them as evenly as possible. And the more you have a linear base, the easier will it be. It will be to build on top of it. So we're going to with 5 now, so alternating. Always try to move them to find the right position. Remember that for an imperfection you don't have to worry, because we can always drizzle some topping on top. Often I just take them, move them. I have to find the right position. And we have to try to obtain an exceptional stability effect. And that's why it's important to have shoes that are as similar to each other as possible. Always hold it. And we're going to go with the final piece. You have to work a little bit with it. When you're done, start pushing and modeling based on what you want to obtain. If you made a good base, you don't risk to have any collapsing or losing shape. We're going to first blast chill in positive to seal our base, and then after the positive blast chilling, we're going to heat our glaze in the oven and we will drizzle it to complete the external part. And this is it with another important part of the building of our profiteroles. We have blast chilled our profiteroles to stabilize our structure. We can now add some glaze to improve the external part if you think that you need so. Do it always on top of your container to remove the excess of glazing that we have outside. You can also do it with a spoon like this to put the quantity that you think is suitable. Maybe you don't want to add too much. Remember that starting from an already blast chilled base, the glaze will have to be at a higher temperature compared to the one we used at the beginning, otherwise it will be very difficult to dress your base. Try to start from the top and go towards the bottom. So we're going to move on a bowl, putting our hands underneath, and we're going to remove the excess of the chocolate glaze. A little at a time, then of course we will clean the surface, there's no problem with this. Having a cold base, so it will stop, the dripping will stop. Always use a silicone spatula because it's easier to work with. Now, when you notice that the dripping and the fluidity of the glazing is finished, we're going to place it in the area where we're going to operate with the final part, and we're going to clean with some paper or a damp cloth. Always remember to eventually also clean the base before then we're going to take a cloth to clean the base. Hold your dish in a stable way, otherwise your profiterole will fall apart. And we're going to replace it in the center. From here we're going to take our pastry bag with a curly tip, with our whipped cream, slightly sugary. We put around 8% of sugar. Put a bowl aside to, especially in the summer, to do some tests. Maybe you have a liquid loss or whatever. And now we're going to work at the base first with some small decorations that do not have to overpower your product. So they must be simply some little puffs. You can also not add them, it's not necessary, but in the majority of the cases we tend to do this. And this is it with our profiteroles. Clearly, if you want to add some little puffs on top, you can do it, but it's better when you have a taller pyramid. We're going to go into refrigeration at +3 degrees, but it's not strange to see it in the frozen shop window. So it will be, if we defrost it, will be a lot softer and damp, so it might be not pleasant. And this is it with the assembling of our profiteroles.